I got my hat on. I don't have to worry about my hair. Although when Dana turned her camera on, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go get a way better shirt because she's at an 11. That's amazing. Hey everyone, we're just gonna wait for folks to filter in here for a couple of minutes, and then we'll get this party started here. Welcome, Dana, Eric. Any big plans this weekend? Eric, you gonna get ice cream and salt and straw on Abbot Kinney down there in Venice?
Oh, come on. If you knew anything about LA, it's all about Jenny's ice cream.
Oh, excuse me.
So many salt and straw haters down here.
I thought that was like the hotness. No,
Candidly, I think it's good ice cream, but if you're in with the cool crowd, you're at Jenny's.
oh, okay. I am distinctly not in the cool crowd. Any big plans for you, Dana?
Surviving is what I always answer with
Oh goodness.
a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. The weekends are all about surviving.
Oh my goodness gracious. That's amazing.
But we
Yes.
do get salt and straw ice cream up here in Seattle. I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know if I venture over there.
It's an Instagram brand. It's essentially an Instagram brand that's gone offline. I don't know. It's like DTC direct to consumer ice cream. Anyway, what would it be like? The blue bottle? I guess the blue bottle of ice cream where it's it's like that much more put together and thus worth the 50% premium.
But like behind the scenes, it's also owned by Nestle Corp, and you're like,
that's right. Yeah, dude. Did Blue Bottle get bought by Nestle or did they get bought by somebody else?
Yeah,
Oh my
Nestle.
God, isn't it amazing? All right, well, we can get this party started here. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully, I'm gonna share the correct screen, not the one that has some AE performance review on it or something like that, and then I would get in trouble. Wonderful. Okay, I think I did it right there. Cool. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm super duper pumped on today's topic and posse here. We're going to be talking about using data-driven management to kick ass, radically increase pipeline, yeah, but also kick ass along a number of other vectors as well. We have amazing folks here. Eric and Dana are both storied sales leaders. Myself, I'm all right, but I think we're going to have some really great actionable stuff for folks to talk about. Just some housekeeping things here. This is going to be about an hour, including Q&A. The chat box in Livestorm, this kind of fancy pants software that we're using, is in the right. So you can just chat in there, do the peanut gallery thing, make fun of my shirt, comment how nice Dana's is. Everything is going to be recorded and the slides will be sent out within 24 hours. Gong's marketing operations guru, Kyle Brown, will knock that out for us. Let's talk about who we've got here today. Why don't we just start on the right and go left? Eric, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Pete. Hey, everybody. Eric Martin here, leading sales at Vanta, a cybersecurity and compliance software company. Yeah, really excited to share. Once again, I hope this comes off as genuine today because I genuinely leverage Gong and Atrium on a daily basis. And yeah, hopefully there's some key learnings, but more than anything, when you get to talk with Pete, it's minimally going to be entertaining. Yeah, so welcome.
And then before Vanta, you were at DataFox, right?
Yeah.
So selling cybersecurity now, and then previously selling to marketing ops, sales operations. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, I guess the short bio would be engineer by study, 2-time failed startup founder, which is how I made my way into sales. And I guess, yeah, most previously I was at a company called DataFox that was acquired by Oracle and landed at Vanta about 2.5 years ago.
First seller and now manager of managers with 20 reps, and man, that'll turn you gray.
Yeah, it's been fun. We joined as I think employee 7. We're now at I think 107. So it's been a bit of a ride.
That's awesome. And Dana, you have been around the block many times, leading many sales teams. Maybe you can introduce yourself to the squad.
Yeah, happy to. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dana Feldman. I lead the strategic sales team here at Gong. I made my way over to Gong after implementing it for my sales org during my time at Amazon. And it was the biggest game changer in terms of a sales tool I'd ever come across. So I had to come be part of this, but prior to Gong and Amazon, I spent time at LinkedIn leading the team selling their Sales Navigator product, and prior to that, at Salesforce. So I've always, I think the thread in there outside of my stint like at Amazon is my career has very much followed a passion for tools and solutions that we can use in this profession, in this very difficult sales profession, that make our world so much better and easier. So I'm excited to have this chat today with everyone.
Yeah, totally. So you were on the sales solutions team at LinkedIn. Was that like early sales nav or like from inception through, or did you move on to that team after kind of sales nav had been around for a while? Because that's a crazy business that kind of came out of nowhere.
I would say I was part of it from inception,
Wow.
in the sense that I was actually down in Australia. I had transferred with Salesforce down there and joined the team there and helped build out the SMB, and then moved over to the enterprise team there. So yeah, we were like just going to market, building the product, figuring it all out. So although LinkedIn obviously had a very strong brand name, we were a startup within LinkedIn at the time. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is cool. And now huge, like a massive business. That's awesome. Hey folks, my name is Pete Kazanjy. I'm the co-founder of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that helps sales managers, AE managers, SDR managers, sales leaders use data to improve rep and team performance. But I'm a little weird because I don't have like a background in sales. Although I didn't come up in sales, although at this point I guess I've been doing it for a decade. That just kind of goes to show you that like time flies. I started my career in like product management and product marketing at VMware way back in the day. And then I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And so like at TalentBin, I went from being like our founder and then first seller, because turns out things don't sell themselves. They needed someone to sell them. I was always our first seller, then our first sales manager, then our sales leader. And that's how I became intimate with a notion of like process-driven, highly analytical, what I like to call modern sales. And that's what inspired the creation of Atrium to kind of like render in software a lot of the stuff that we would do hack together with like duct tape and baling wire in like dashboards and Google Sheets and so on and so forth. I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales that's pretty popular. And then I also started the nation's largest peer education community for sales operations, sales leadership folks. It's called Modern Sales Pros. So that's a little bit on me. And now I run, I'm the founder of Atrium, but I also run our sales organization. We have about 10 AEs and about half as many SDRs. So that's the stage that I'm at. Cool. So that's a little bit. So we have a good party posse here.
We've got a couple of TalentBin alumni at
Yeah, they're good. They're good folks for sure. Yes. Going shopping in the former TalentBin pool is a good place to go hunting. Yeah. So agenda here today, we have a giveaway that we're going to talk about. It's not the Bulldog. Sorry. We're going to be talking about why it's important to have a data-driven approach, how to have data-driven conversations, which is actually really important because a lot of times people are like, well, I have all this information, I know what's going on, but like, how do I actually talk with my reps about that in a way that affects change? So first things first, we are doing a giveaway. This is one of my favorite recent books. I try to crush a sales book a month-ish. That's like my goal. I probably do it every 2 months. So I like shortfall there. This is an amazing book on sales coaching by Corey Bray and Hillman Sorey, 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach. It's written as a novel, which I always love that, kind of like those parable-based books that will teach you something while you're like reading a narrative. It's absolutely fantastic. Corey and Hillman write a bunch of different great books, but this one I'm just kind of over the moon on. The first 50 people to tag Gong. So just take your favorite takeaway from today's session and just post it on LinkedIn, tag Gong. We'll find you based on that, and then reach out to get your details. We'll send you a copy of this book, which is, I have everybody read it. We give it to all of our customers. It's super fantastic. So that's so let's get into kind of the meat of the topic here. First, I think what we wanted to talk about is like, what does it mean to be a data-driven manager? Because people talk about this a lot and it's like, okay, what does that actually mean? I'll kind of start first to kick things off, and then we'll kind of go through the rest of the folks here. To me, I think the biggest thing regarding being a data-driven manager is really like making sure that you're focused on not just like lagging indicators. One of my favorite books is by Bill Walsh. It's called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And because he was the coach of the San Francisco 49ers and then also the Stanford Cardinal. And so one of the things that he always espoused was like, you can't worry about like score, like winning the game, the score on the scoreboard, because like, that's something that's like, so distant from your personal actions that you take as a linebacker or a quarterback or whatever. And instead what you have to do is you have to focus on executing really well on the thing that's in front of you. And I think that really applies quite well to sales management, to sales, customer success, SDR behavior, AE behavior, where you can really only focus on the things that are in front of you. And then importantly, measuring those leading indicators, both the quantity and the quality of those leading indicators, will help you know that you're going to get there. And so this is something that like we focus on very heavily at Atrium, where we kind of leading indicators, whether it's like you're talking about the SDR team and how many accounts are being touched or how much activity they're engaging in. And the same is true on the AE side as well. Are we engaging in a sufficient quantity of customer facing meetings? Do we have enough new pipeline or new opportunities flowing into our pipe? Are those moving along? Are they moving? Are we having enough stage progressions? Things like that. And then high quality of that will then land in good outputs, right? Like high win rates, obviously bookings, opportunity creation, if you're talking about like SDRs, so on and so forth. So that's like what I think about when I think about being a data-driven manager, is like making sure it's like the factory, right? Like making sure that every part of the assembly line, if you will, and I know Eric's a former mechanical engineer, so we always geek out on this, like making sure that every part of the assembly line is instrumented, and rather than just like worrying about if enough widgets are popping out the back there. So that's a little bit of how I think about it. Dana, how do you think about being a data-driven sales manager?
Yeah, I love that. I love this concept of leading and lagging indicators, like inputs and outputs. I think what's been really interesting in our profession and as leaders is that we carry the most stressful responsibility of an organization, which is to bring in revenue. And we are the blindest to what actually leads to success. And so I think about this a lot because we are just now in the last couple of years finally getting the tools and the technology we've needed all along to take us away from focusing on the lagging indicators, because that's all we've had, right? Like we won this deal, we closed this deal, we have this percentage of reps attaining, but any good leader, the first question they ask is, why are we winning here? Why are we losing here? Why this percentage of attainment? And how do I grow that, replicate it, whatnot? And when we go to ask the whys, what's happened is we get all subjective anecdotal feedback, right? Like the reps are like, it's because of this, or the manager's like, it's because of this. And we've been making decisions for such a long time on how to manage our sales organizations off of opinions. That is what we've been doing. Yeah. And one of the ways that I think about what does it mean to be a data-driven leader is I put in two buckets. One is if you are at a level in sales leadership where you are making strategic decisions on the direction of your team, asking yourself and ensuring that you have data, objective data to back that up. I think if we get really honest with ourselves as leaders and we have these initiatives we're rolling out to our team, when we ask, like, what has the data showed us to say that is the right initiative in that? And then I think if you're a frontline leader where you are a tremendous amount of your role is coaching the reps, asking yourself, like, why am I coaching the rep on this thing? What is the data that has proven that this is what I need to coach on? And the story that I have that was like my aha moment where I was making a huge mistake was during my time of leading my sales org at Amazon, I had this hypothesis that we needed to really invest in discovery training for our reps. And I'm sure there are plenty of leaders on this call that could raise their hand and be like, yeah, we need that too. We need that, right? But to tell you the truth, I didn't really have great data that led me to that hypothesis or even backed it up. And what was fascinating to me is we rolled out Gong there. And what I soon came to realize was we did not need to be training our reps in discovery skills. They were awesome at discovery. What I ended up finding out was for my SMB team, out of all the calls they were having, only 40% of those calls had next steps being discussed in them. And of that 40%, about half of that was the rep saying, I'm going to email you next steps. No, death of a sales cycle is not getting mutually agreed and strong next steps. And so I had this moment where I was like, wait a minute, I almost spun up my enablement team, I almost bulldozed my sales team with training they didn't need on discovery. This happens all too often. And nothing's more annoying to a sales rep than getting sales time taken away to get trained on something they don't actually need training on.
Yeah.
And so I had this aha moment that was like, wait a minute, the data is telling me that we need to be focusing on how to enable our team to close out calls strong, get the mutual plan. So that's just a really interesting example where I almost really messed up. I finally got something to give me the data I needed and really went down the right path, and we saw incredible results. And also we saw like the reps receive it very well because it was data telling them, and they were like, thank you for not wasting my time on another discovery training that we don't need, right? So a really good win-win there on both sides.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Can I piggyback on that, Pete?
Yeah, go for it.
And just say, like, this is where, like, at Vanta, we use a combination of Gong plus Atrium for, like, combination of, like, qualitative and the quantitative.
Right.
And to address exactly what Dana was saying, there are two very specific kind of metrics that Atrium gives us that we lean into heavily for coaching and identifying where in the sales cycle we might need to coach, whether it's as a unit and or an individual. Specifically, it's my favorite chart, which you think is the conversion. So Atrium lets you like see. So taking a step back, at Vanta, our sales, we have 4 stages in our sales cycle, and these sales cycles are fast, right? Like 2 to 4 weeks, and our general conversion rates from each stage to closed one have remained steady or increased over the last 12 months. In any case, what we can do is we can then look, we've been talking about leading metrics and lagging metrics. What I like in Atrium is that there are what I call like barely lagging metrics.
I call them intermediary. They're like these. They're like right here, like in the middle.
Where I can look at what is each rep's conversion from like one stage to the next or to closed one over the last 7 days or the last 30 days. And I can spot anomalies quickly, and I can say, oh, interesting, like this rep's close rate from stage 4 just took a dip. Let's go in and make sure that, like, one, they might need a refresh on like what is our definition for moving from stage 4, and or 2, to Dana's point, it's like, hey, are we missing the solidified next step, whatever agreement that we might need, and we can check that quickly in Gong. It's been really effective for our frontline managers especially, and also for me, candidly, because I get these reports from Atrium on a weekly basis that like calls out these anomalies that we can go in and almost like a sniper-like way go fix it or address it.
We had a similar situation where, so one of the things that we do at one of our superpowers in our sales motion is like we sell on customer data. It's like Datadog or whatever. It's like an assisted PLG motion. PLG is like the hotness, but it's not like self-serve. People will show up, they'll turn on their turn on an Atrium instance, they'll connect it to their CRM. Or alternatively, what will happen is our reps will do a disco call, and what they'll seek to do, like they'll identify pain, they'll reveal pain, size the magnitude of that. And then what they ought to do is they ought to seek to get the prospect to turn on data. Or be like, oh, that sounds great. We can help you with this, this, and this. Let's go ahead and turn on an account for you, and you can see it with your eyes. You can see the thing that you were talking about. And so what we realized when we were doing this, I was doing it at QBR about 2 quarters ago. Our top performing reps were just they were getting themselves way more data lights. We call them data lights internally. They were getting way more data lights because their conversion rate off of like a meeting pending op to that data light was way higher than a couple of other reps. And so what was weird was, what did you call it, Eric? Barely lagging? Is that what you said?
Barely lagging, yeah.
Yeah, because it was this like weird thing, because like we measure, like we're super anal, right? Like we measure opportunity ownership and pipe, but also like new op inflow, like meetings. And so what we were missing was the fact that you had these reps who had like new ops flowing in, but they weren't converting them to data light as much. And so the reps who they were just giving themselves way more at bats, because like our win rate from live data is 50% or 55% or whatever. And so what we realized was, oh man, we have like half of our reps that are not being like aggressive enough there and just assumptive there. And then when we went back in the call recording stuff, like totally you could see it. You could totally see it. Like the 2 reps who were just like super, just like bulldogs and be like, all right, let's go, let's check it out. Like you could see theirs, and then you could see the other reps were like, if you might be interested, we could maybe do X, Y, Z. And it's, whoa, okay, cool. I think I see the difference between these like conversion rates here. And so what we did was we just snapped everybody into the former example of just, hey, you know what? That's awesome. Let's go ahead and set up an account for you and it'll be really cool. And then everybody's conversion rates like snapped into band with the high performers. And then 60 days later, the bookings came and whatever. It's a really good kind of like chocolate and peanut butter sort of situation with like call recording or conversation intelligence and kind of conversion rate stuff and metrics, because it allows you to do that. And then importantly, enforce compliance after the fact, which I think, Dana, this is something that we wanted to talk about in this section, was like how to have data-driven coaching conversations and move people. So I think that you had some stuff that you wanted to talk about, moving the people in the middle, et cetera, and how to have data-driven coaching conversations that impact and change rep behavior.
Yeah, it's a topic I'm super passionate about, mostly because I've made a lot of mistakes in this arena, and I remember when I was a rep. But like, there is nothing more, one of the most frustrating things to sales reps is when their manager is trying to coach them on something that they don't feel they need coaching on. And it causes friction. It's what happens.
Right.
And the only way that we, in the past, were able to figure out what to coach on would be ride-alongs. And as frontline leaders, busy. And so maybe you 2 or 3 in a week, and then you're going to make a call on the skill they need to coach on. And like, maybe that rep just had a bad week on discovery skills. It happens all the time. So one of the things, so I think that's why it's such a passionate topic about how to use data to coach. But one of the things that we did at Amazon, and something that I think all sales leaders should be thinking about, is no matter your sales org, there's always a bell curve. And our sales ops and our finance partners actually create it so there is one. And so you have your bell curve, and you've got like 20% of your team high performers, 20% bottom performers, and then the 60% is always in the middle. And what happens with frontline leaders, and there's so many studies done on this. So after this, if y'all Google moving the middle or the mighty middle, there's books, there's Harvard studies. Okay, so I'm going to take from them, but there's a lot of studies, and it's human nature that we focus on the tails. Our frontline leaders will go and just like hug and love the high performers, and then like really try and save the low performers. It's this middle pack. And the concept is that if you actually put some focus on just the middle, if that is like your number one focus, you will have a bigger impact on your results than ever focusing on the high or the low performers. High performers already performing high, they can only get like a tiny bit better, where the middle of the pack can do it big. There were 2 things. One of the challenges I had with my team at Amazon was I would lay in bed at night and I would have no idea if my frontline leaders were coaching. I had no idea. And so we tried to solve it by having the managers log an activity in Salesforce that said coaching with like a couple notes. And that's how we were like trying to track their coaching efforts. But like the second piece was you promoted a lot from within. And so it was a lot of rep to new manager. And let's get honest, we've all been there, first time manager. You don't know what to coach on. You do not know. You're like trying to find things and trying to do 1,000 ride-alongs, and you're exhausted by the end of the week. So my managers didn't know what to coach on. And then the third piece was they were spending their time on the tails, on the wrong thing that was going to give us results. And we did this whole moving the middle initiative. And yes, we rolled out Gong to do it. I don't want this to become a Gong pitch, but I have to tell y'all the mechanism and the vehicle we use to fix the problem. And we rolled out Gong, which gave us visibility into our managers coaching, because there's a manager scorecard. It gave my managers, for the first time ever, visibility into where they were spending their time amongst their team to self-regulate, to go focus on the middle. And then the last piece was my managers were overjoyed because they actually had data to tell them what they needed to coach this rep on versus this rep, because you shouldn't take a blanket approach, right? And the morale of the team was incredible, because finally the reps were like, thank you for coaching me on the one thing I actually need coaching on versus like a blanket initiative. So it was huge. And I think the other really interesting thing about some of these solutions that you can have for your sales teams in these coaching discussions is, for the first time ever, we can democratize coaching, meaning the rep doesn't have to sit and wait around for the manager and the one-on-one to get that really great coaching session. The rep can have some will to go and find these calls or this data and actually see where they stack rank on it, or where they need to fix, or what they need to listen to. And that's really important to show like a will aspect versus just skill. And then the last thing, just around like how to have data-driven coaching conversations, it's really common for frontline leaders. They're some of the busiest people in an organization, and they're jumping from meeting to meeting, 1,000 things in their head. And it's like, how can I quickly figure out what I need to coach on? What is that like needle in the haystack thing that is based on data? And that's where we use these deal drivers, which basically are saying, hey, across your entire team's pipeline, we're going to highlight the risk to you.
Right.
And actually show you where you can, 5 minutes before a one-on-one, find the really important thing to talk about on that deal with the rep, and stop wasting one-on-one time, which happens a lot these days with a manager going, okay, so what are the next steps on that deal? And what level of seniority are we engaged with? And where are we? And what was the last conversation? Like, all of that should be known in a very quick way before you go into a one-on-one. And instead it should be like, hey, I noticed that we're not multi-threaded in this account. Let's strategize together on how we can get there. That is the convos that the reps want on their deals, not the fields that should be filled out in Salesforce that aren't the manager's going to ask you about. I think all of this just to say, like, these coaching conversations, I think we have the tools available to us to get us to a better place with them, to get it data-based instead of opinionated. And I also think for all the frontline leaders out there, even more senior leaders, thinking about how are you really solving this middle performer challenge that every sales team has in the world, and what are you really putting behind that to get the best out of the results and effort?
Yeah, I think it's funny that you talk about the kind of the middle thing, because that's literally the thing that I just had with some of my team. It's actually it's the same sort of situation, but it's essentially the implementation and the same situation as the thing that I was mentioning earlier about kind of conversion rates and making like opening. And so I had a rep who really smart rep, but had come from a sales motion where previously he was selling into an existing market, applicant tracking systems, and it was the new, so like they were selling a new solution, but generally speaking they were displacing an existing solution. There was a renewal date coming up pretty much because there was like an old janky piece of software that was going to be cycled out. And so what this did was it created a situation where like there was a natural forcing function. And so it wasn't just him, it was like the entire organization. Like there's a natural forcing function. So they hadn't like developed the muscle of like, all right, like we have to be the forcing function because there was a renewal coming up. And so we identified this, and we saw that he needed to open stronger, and he also needed to close stronger. So one of the things that we do in our organization in order to facilitate data-driven management, like get data-driven conversations, is ensure that there's coaching material, like in one-on-ones, there's specific we call them coaching dashboards that have, each rep has it where like yours is focused on opening strong and convert, and you can see it here where it's like win rates from this pilot situation. We want to see yours get higher there, and you can actually see that happening right there. We need you to close stronger. And then what ends up happening is as those things get fixed, then you move on to the next thing, because we're not going to be coaching every single thing for a given rep all at once. That's like absolute nonsense. I don't know if like folks play golf or what have you. The example that I really like to use is a golf swing, right? Like when you get coaching on your golf swing, like a golf swing is really complicated. I'm not a very good golfer, but it has a lot of moving parts. And so usually a productive golf coach will be focused on one part. Right? Hey, you need to keep your head down, or hey, you need to like your arm straight, or like, hey, let's focus on like releasing your left knee, or what have you. But it's only one. It's not like, hey, let's do this and this and this. Great, go. And it's instead just let's focus on this, and then let's do like the repetitions of that, and then see if the output, like the slice stop, right? Did your distance elongate, like whatever it is. And so that's what I do with my team, is bring the data to bear to say, hey, I'm observing this based on this. You're not getting as many of your ops as your peers to light up their data, or you're not getting those next meetings and it's showing up in your follow-up meeting ratio. Let's figure out why that might be happening. And then let's do some role playing around the behavior that we need to change there. Like in Dana's case, like, hey, at the end of every call, what I want, here's your script. It's on a Post-it note right here. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and recap here. And yeah, I would love to get, here's my recap. Did I hear that right? Is there anything you'd like to add? No, you nailed it, Dana. Oh, okay, wonderful. I would love to get time on the calendar, placeholder for 30 minutes for 2 weeks out or whatever, and just ensure that they actually have the tool to do that. And then make sure that you're actually looking at the data, like to see if that behavior is remediating. Is this person lighting up more data? Is this person getting more next steps on the calendar as indicated by their follow-up meeting ratio? And then the lag on the lag, of course, would be like their win rate going up and what have you. And so that's what we do, is we just like, hey, here's the thing that we're working on, the behavioral thing that we're working on with this rep as indicated by the issues that we like detected in the data. We're like, here's the behaviors that we're going to commit on. And part of this was informed by like some of the things that were talked about in that book I was talking about, 5 Secrets of Sales Coach. This is the thing that you're going to do. And then this is the metric that we're going to watch in order to indicate kind of improvement there. And so you can kind of see it with this rep right here. This is anonymized, but you can see that the first thing we were focused on was conversion to next. And then the next thing that we went to after that was talk ratio, because one of the things that's we actually have a new integration with Gong, so we can get Gong data into Atrium. You can see that this rep had a little bit of like a talking problem. Gong talk ratio was above target there, and also his monologue was higher than expected. And so we started working on that next, and you can see that it started diving down there. That's kind of how we approach things. Eric, did you want to share?
I'll plug for Gong there, just in that, like, one of the more powerful features that we use is probably actually probably pretty sophisticated, but it's just searching across call transcripts. So to your point, it's searching across the call transcripts, and it's also using their trackers. So just kind of taking one step back to just connecting or giving another example to what Dana was describing, right? Like for us, we have proactive coaching, right? Where like we roll out a new feature and we want to make sure reps are kind of addressing that feature or using the talk track that is we'd like them to use. Great use case for us to kind of check these like Gong trackers within something like an Atrium. At the same time, we've talked about this already a little bit earlier, but to your point of like, maybe we see a dip in one of these other metrics that matter to us, the conversion one, in terms of like, to Dana's point, enabling the reps to kind of go do some kind of self kind of assessment before any kind of dedicated coaching. This is where, once again, like a manager can have a conversation with the rep and say, hey, interestingly, like you're not converting as many deals from stage 1 to stage 2 as you should be. I suspect there's a combination of we're not asking question X, Y, and Z. And so we'll do coaching one-on-one within different kind of squads, but then also as a team. But like at a minimum, it's nice that like now we're in this position where whether it's for one-on-one coaching and or for kind of squad coaching, the reps can go back in and they can like quickly go and find where they may or may not have been doing the things that either they know they should have been doing or that we'd asked them to do within Gong, quickly pull those snippets out and allow us to then look at real examples when we are kicking off and or kind of working through coaching. So yeah, once again, just to kind of highlight hopefully a little bit of both tools there and how we kind of use them hand in hand.
Yeah. And I think a big thing that I know has been a pain in my neck, but is like learning how to manage in a distributed environment, because my background is in like at TalentBin, we had like 20-person sales organization that was like, single sales floor in San Francisco Bay Area. Like it wasn't high ASP remote reps, like field reps, et cetera, et cetera. This notion of like remote management with a distributed team is like super, super different. I would love to understand like how you all have coped with that, because I don't think that's changing anytime soon, because like people have moved different places and like hot houses or like whatever. So I don't think that's like changing anytime soon. So like we as managers need to change and adapt there. How, like Dana, how have you modified your approach for a distributed sales team?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is two things for me. I think the first one is you have to assume that when you are getting into your one-on-ones with your reps or whatever coaching opportunity there is, they're already Zoom fatigued. Okay, like how do you as a leader get to the heart of the matter in the most efficient way and the most valuable way to the rep? And so I think it really is around tooling your sales force up to be coached in the most efficient and data-driven way. And I think just that alone changes the game. Right? It just gives you so much visibility into where you're blind. I think you mentioned this before, but when you go into those one-on-ones and you're talking about deals or their pipeline, You can't do the Zoom inspection, which is, again, asking all those questions around what's going on in their business that you can find out through a tool today that like tells you. And instead,
right,
you really need to be looking for the risk signals in those deals and quickly hone in on just those where the rep, it's like clear the rep needs some coaching,
right.
or hone in on the skill that the rep needs coaching on versus that boring, monogamous talk track of all their pipeline. Yeah, we at Gong surface these deal warnings, and this is my lifesaver, right? Out of all of my pipeline, I go and look at it, and all I pay attention to are the yellow warnings, the triangles, because we customize it where it's picking up what we know matters in our sales cycle. And then I'm not wasting the rep's time talking about the deals that don't have this risk because they are following through our sales methodology. They're following through what you'd expect. I think tooling and really thinking about how you're going to spend your time in your one-on-one is key for this remote environment, so that in the small snippets you have with them, you don't fatigue them, you actually really help them with something, and you start to open their eyes to something as well.
Yeah, I'll take it a little more qualitatively. We were just talking about this before the webinar started. But so for us, like still small growing sales org, and obviously like the remote thing is new to us. This is probably just common knowledge for sales orgs that have been remote pre-pandemic. But another thing that's really important for us is addressing the thing that, remember when Facebook came out, they're like, new users need to have this many new connections within this much time in order to be like the same thing where like now when people are remote and they're not all like sitting next to one another, it's like making sure that new hires are empowered to build trust, friendship, camaraderie, rapport with a like X number of peers across like a certain time period as well, just to ensure that no one's floating on an island. Like people have peers who they are comfortable kind of chatting with, Slack huddling with all day, whatever it may be, like beyond kind of their manager and their manager's manager. And so just to put a highlight on one other kind of human side of this, like that's something that we try to make sure happens sooner versus later.
Yeah. How do you facilitate that? Because like we have dedicated ramping buddies. So like my more senior AEs, they're like assigned to more newer AEs, and we give them like a ramping stipend or whatever, just like for the kind of incremental like effort, like give them some money for that and give them a rip on first deal that their ramping buddy closes. But that's like more kind of like formal, like this is your ramping buddy, as opposed to like the more informal kind of like it's like the virtual version of like person that you happen to be seated next to in the office. You know what I mean? Like how do you facilitate that? How have you done that?
It's tricky. Some of it is trying to be thoughtful in terms of which teams we'll put new hires on, which like smaller teams, based on kind of personality fits. The other is kudos to our like managers. They do a really good job. I guess like a secondary kudos to Winning by Design, who like all of our frontline managers go through their training, and they've done a really good job. Our managers have of creating these very intimate families, let's call it, within our sales org, where they create opportunities for reps to lean on one another on any number of levels. And I suspect that plays, but we also as a team meet in person quarterly. And what we find is that like immediately after those kind of in person, it's if you didn't have a couple of good buddies, now you like definitely have a lot of good buddies. So it's important for us to be thoughtful about when we can do the full team gatherings, as well as we have pods throughout the US. We can also try to empower them to get together as often as possible as well.
Yeah, I try to do that too. Like we have a couple reps. I was mentioning this earlier. We have a couple reps in Santa Barbara. We have a number of folks in the Bay Area. And so anytime there's like an opportunistic situation where someone's like, I'm going to be in town for XYZ, I'll be like, cool, I'm buying everybody. If anybody wants to show up to like water polo game, or like one of our SDRs is a DJ and if anybody wants to go there, like I'm buying, right? Like up to $50 for like dinner and drinks per person, and then just allow them to like self-organize in order to facilitate that. That's been really good. How do you guys do those quarterly meetings? Like you just like, all right, like the sales org's flying into like Palm Springs, or like what do you do?
It's funny you say that. When we were small enough that you could rent a massive, like literally massive rental, we did that in Palm Springs actually in May. Plug to a fellow YC company, Flock. They like are in the business of helping remote teams come together. And so we're using them to schedule our next offsite in Austin, Texas. But they take like a travel agency, they take a lot of the heavy lifting.
Is it all, are you just doing the sales team or is it like Vanta wide?
Good question. So what I'm talking about is just for the sales team. We are considering doing kind of company-wide things as well.
But I think that's important because like I've been doing that as well, as like getting like it's like units, right? Like you want to have SDR team has esprit de corps and the AE team has esprit de corps, but then you want the AE and the SDR team to have esprit de corps, so they're not like we're on the red team and they're on the blue team. They're like, they're always passing us like crappy ops. And then you want to do the same thing with the CS team, like they're together, but then the whole go-to-market team, and it's like this fractal situation where, and then of course there's always like budgetary constraints. So yeah, I haven't done a good job of like figuring that out. So I've tried to like do it more organically. Yeah, I think one of the things that I've really struggled with is people talk about like sales floor as like having energy, which I mean is like undeniable, right? But the other thing too is that like when reps aren't on calls, they hear other people. So what you've got is you've got this messaging and behavioral like reinforcing thing going on, and then like when people are like often distributed, like you lose that like osmosis, like reinforcement via osmosis. And it's funny to go back to the data-driven management, like how do you have these conversations? Like I was noticing that this one rep who's actually a fairly senior rep and he had moved somewhere, some of his behavioral like signifiers were indicating that something was like off. And then I was talking with him and I was like, and he's like, I'm not doing anything different. I'm not doing anything different. And then when I listened to his calls, it was like totally different. And it was just like, I think that just humans have a tendency, like without reinforcement, I call it like messaging drift. This is a new thing to me. So I'm like, what is this crazy thing that's like happening? And I've never seen it before. And I think what the kind of the metaphor that I like is, imagine if your sales team is like on a bunch of inner tubes and then there's like, and they're roped together. So like somebody starts drifting over here, like the mass of people over here pull them back. Whereas like now they're not like tied together anymore. And so one of the things that, one of the things that we've really gotten, like I was telling the Gong product management leadership the other day, we have gone crazy on trackers. because that way you just like, because you can't listen to every call, it's not possible. And so what you want to make sure is that people are in band talking. So like we have all of our disco questions, there's probably 6 most important disco questions, and of course different questions are tied to use cases. So we have like a tracker on each of those use cases, like, hey, have you hired reps recently and how do you go about tracking that's a really important Atrium use case. So we have a tracker on that to make sure that AEs are talking about ramp. We have a phrase that like we're trying to like create a category of data-driven sales management. So we need to make sure that the reps are talking about data-driven sales management. There's other ones too, like goal tracking and so on and so forth. And it was crazy because like I was like, oh man, I've got this messaging drift problem. How the hell am I going to solve this? So I went ham on these trackers, and then now we've been visualizing the heck out of them, both behavioral, so like the talk ratio and monologues and things like that, but also these trackers. And it was hilarious to see. So you can see it right here, like we had some pretty big differentiation in terms of the amount of the frequency with which reps were talking about things like data-driven sales management, making sure that people were asking about how do you track the health of ramp. And so that was a holy mackerel moment to me. And now it was visible. And I was like, okay, cool. I had seen this messaging drift in a case of one person. I have it everywhere. Like we have termites. Oh man. And so the good news is then we implemented all these trackers to help with that. And now what's cool is like all that information is being broadcast out through a variety of dashboards, and we set a bunch of goals on it as well. And the behavior is changing now. So people are now, this is an old screenshot, and it was this guy right here. We put him on blast, but even the folks who were kind of here, but now everybody's like up at 60% of their calls. They're talking about data-driven management or ramping or what have you. And I think this is a serious problem that's not going to go away anytime soon. Cause like you do training, you bring somebody on board and like you take them through a bunch of like training sessions, they listen to calls or whatever. But then if they're like not hanging out around a bunch of other people, like things can drift. So like making sure that you have arms around that, I think is super important.
Can we ask Dana, like at a much bigger sales org, like using Pete's analogy here of like your team floating down the Russian River, like how do you make sure that everyone is like all the inner tubes are staying together and someone's not getting stuck in the rocks?
Oh my God, it's a big question. But I think about it from like a couple different angles. I think there's like this cultural aspect to of like, how are you keeping the connective tissue between your team and sharing the best practice, that sort of thing. I think the second one is, I think all day long, at least I've seen it, we roll out so many things to our teams and ask them to do so many things.
It's hard.
And so I think we need to get better at the vital few, but I think when you think about what you're going to roll out to your team, mapping out the reinforcement plan is like the most important piece. And I don't think we do as a profession. I don't know that we always do that well. And I don't think reinforcement just comes from like showing the data, right? And pointing out where maybe like the tubes have become disconnected.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to be tracking this, but I think we have to be open to, hey, wait a minute, maybe this data is telling us something that we need to know. We need to go seek to understand first from the rep. Okay, we trained you on this methodology. We've rolled it out. Only half of you are using it. What's going on? And get feedback. We might have to pivot a little bit. I think there's a lot of pieces to keeping everyone tied together. I think the simplest act also though of, hey, we want you to be doing this behavior, this talk track, or this pitch. And as the reps do it, I think it's on us as leaders to share that snippet, to share that part of the conversation. Every day, myself and my other leaders are posting like, listen to this great positioning of this, listen to this great objection handling. I think that's on us to be finding those moments and sharing those out so that everyone stays engaged and is seeing what the best of the best looks like.
Yeah, that's spot on. What we've just been talking about is very top of mind for me because, like, to Pete's point earlier about like people just not being next to each other, it's like there may have been instances in office where you are working on testing new talk tracks with certain reps, and then because they're testing those on the floor, other folks are hearing those talk tracks. And in the distributed world, like, you can still invest in introducing new talk tracks with select reps, but unless the other reps are all like Gong stalking them, you know, and to Dana's point, they're like sharing these snippets, which like you try to create the culture where that is not just encouraged, but something people naturally do, then like the waterfall doesn't like reach the bottom.
Yep. Remote is fun. I think it's a big nut to crack. Cool. So I think what we wanted to do here is just do a really quick poll. Polls are in the upper right-hand corner. And so just go ahead and submit the poll there if you're interested in turning some of the insights here into action. Go ahead and fill that out. I think we had some kind of questions that we wanted to get into that had kind of shown up here. I think one, and I think Dana, this would be a really great one for you, since you guys, your team, I think works on strategic accounts, I want to say, if I recall correctly. We had a question about like, how do you use data to instrument like those higher ASP sales motions and sellers? How are you approaching that?
Yeah, so I think there's, I look at it as two sides, right? There's a lot of data you can get back on what your reps are doing with regards to their soft skills. So talk time, patience level, interactivity. And most of the time up market, you're assuming that your reps have mastered that to some degree. I will say you'll be surprised. There's still these pieces, but for the most part, they've mastered it. And it's more about looking at the data on how can we unstick a deal. Hey, I'm trying to sell, I remember even at my time we were trying to sell a very large thing with Chick-fil-A, and they were like, hey, we're not going to do this until you fix X in your product or until you do Y with pricing. And being able to take the voice of the customer of that exact feedback and then get the head of engineering, the head of pricing, the head of product marketing mentioned directly to that snippet, really, and saying, how will you help me unstick this deal, is huge in these upmarket deals, because for so long that feedback has just been shared anecdotally and it can fall on deaf ears a lot of times. And now you're like, you can't escape this voice of the customer. It is like right here. I think the second thing about the upmarket deals with this data is oftentimes these are high stake meetings. There's a lot of time between the meetings.
Right.
People still have nerves like in the meeting, and so their active listening is not always at a really high percentage. And so allowing your most senior reps to relax with the note taking, because it's the conversation will be captured, allowing them to rewatch their game tape to prep them for the next meeting, and really show up with like, hey, the last time we talked, you shared with me these 3 things. I didn't get to answer for you these 2. Let's make sure we do that today. Most of our calls at Gong start out with the prospect going, oh my God, you remember that better than I do. And it's like, oh, and I just have my game tape. I think it's about showing up ready and polished, and then making sure you're not missing anything in what they told you in the moment to really push these deals forward. And so much of it up market is about time saving, reps not having to log notes in CRM anymore. They love that. And using the data and the insights to unstick deals, and getting your surrounding business partners and exec team swarmed on this with you with the right pieces of the data from the conversations that will move the deal forward. Does that answer your question, or is there anywhere you want me to go more with that? Mark, that might be you that I think asked something about that.
Yeah, I think that's great. The one thing I will add to that though is that a lot of organization, and this is what when I first met Dana, I was like, oh my gosh, you've built in every segment. This is rad. Like 5-tool player. I think that oftentimes people like have this erroneous assumption that just because ASP is high doesn't mean that there can't be like metrical indicators of performance of the rep. And I think that it comes from a vestigial like understanding of how it's essentially that leading indicator thing, right? Oh, well, like these deals are really long. It's a 6-month sales cycle, a 9-month sales cycle. So how could you possibly instrument behavior? And it turns out that like you still can, because it turns out that there's still 40 days or 40 hours in the week. And we would prefer our reps to be having like filling their time with selling behavior. They may be working on fewer deals, but ideally they're multi-threading far more muscularly. So it's like, hey, just because you're an upmarket seller doesn't mean that like 3 meetings a week is appropriate. You still should be at like 7 to 12 or 13 or whatever, not 20 like the crazy Vanta crew. But like it's just with more humans in those accounts. Because like, guess what? You want to reduce risk in this deal, and like in this big deal, well, you shouldn't be single threaded or double threaded or triple threaded. Like now you should be meeting with like the influence team and like even folks outside of there. And so I think that's a really important thing to realize, is that like a lot of the instrumentation around like activity and like conversion rates are going to be hard, because like you only have so many deals. The stage progressions are going to be tough. Like that, there's going to be like low signal there. But like understanding that if somebody's multi-threading, if somebody is like keeping busy, and then also the other thing too with a lot of these upmarket deals, because it can be really hard for an SDR to break into those accounts oftentimes. So a lot of these AEs, a lot of these upmarket AEs, there's an expectation for substantial self-prospecting. Are they doing that? Right? Are they doing new pipe gen? Are they engaging new accounts? Are they having good, new first meetings? And so that's really important, because you definitely don't want to show up 6 months later and be like, oops, I guess I didn't prospect for an entire quarter. And so I think that ends up being really important, even in those high ASP situations, especially when you have fairly senior, fairly highly paid, fairly high ego senior reps, to make sure that they're doing those things that oftentimes can like fall by the wayside when you're like laser focused on bigger deals. Wonderful. So I think we're out of time here. That was super fun. Shocking. Not shocking at all. I knew that it was going to be an awesome conversation with all of us. As noted earlier.
Can I give one final plug, Pete?
Yeah, what's up, Eric?
Yeah, so I want to give a shout out to Pierce Osgood, AE at Gong, who persistently told me from day one we need it, and we ended up getting it. Thank you, Pierce. And then also, I'd be remiss if I didn't say kudos to Livestorm, who's a Vanta client and SOC 2 compliant as well.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Yeah. Excellent. But yeah, as noted, we're going to send out the recording after the fact, etc. For folks who don't follow Gong on LinkedIn, go for it. Also, if folks are interested in getting started with data-driven sales management, you can set up an Atrium account. It takes 2 minutes to do. Just go to atriumhg.com and sign up there, connect sales for us, and you'll be on your merry way, getting fully datafied. Awesome to see you guys. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and look forward to doing this again soon, okay?
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Dana.
Okay. Bye, squad.